Well, to help us make sense of the latest political developments, we are now joined in studio by political analyst Professor Kwandiwe Kondlo. Prof, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Prof, let's look at today's events. That statement by the ANC following that NWC. A lot of people, for some reason, expected it to go the direction where the president, is called to step down by the ANC itself, which is something that analysts like you would then disagree with. Am I correct?
Yes. Tabila, it's not easy to call a president to step down unless he does it voluntarily. Mr. Mbeki, out of conscience and honor and respect for South Africa, decided to voluntarily step down. It would be naive to expect that Mr. Zuma will do the same. Look at the way how he got into power, through a lot of maneuvers, fighting populism, and it's very unlikely that he can easily give away the position of power. It won't be that easy. And besides that, he knows very well the character of the organization that he's leading. The ANC is deeply divided. The role of money in ANC affairs has become so serious and so bad. Such a deeply divided structure, for a clever politician, it's easy to manipulate in his favor.
Prof, speaking of the organization itself, I want us to delve into the power dynamics within the ANC. We had key people within the organization, speaking out against the president following the reshuffle last week. Now, it seems like those people have suddenly retreated. How should this be perceived?
I think it can be perceived in the following lines. First of all, the opposition, I call it opposition to Mr. Zuma's presidency, it has not yet coalesced around one single strong personality and leader. It has not. As
in a replacement?
Yes, a person who's prepared to lead the opposition and the fight against Mr. Zuma's faction. It has not yet coalesced. It's still very disjointed.
Won't you say the deputy president has raised his hand in a way?
And secondly, the deputy president, people thought he was raising his hand. But after the press conference, some people in certain quarters are beginning to question whether the deputy president is the kind of person who can lead a fight for change within the ANC itself.
I want us to move on to other questions, but I find it interesting that you mentioned that when you speak, of the kind of person that can lead the ANC to a change. Who is that person? Does that person even exist within the leadership ranks of the ANC at this point in time?
Tabitha, I think there are many people who are very capable within the ANC, both men and women, who can actually lead the ANC. But the ANC needs to get its house in order, especially after the Jacob Zuma debacle. The ANC will need to go through a serious moment of introspection and reflection. Make sure that its foundation documents are actually for a governing party, a modern political party, you see, from the constitution that the ANC has. And certain documents will need really to be reviewed and revised to make sure that the organization is actually ready to govern.
Prof, the words introspection and reflection have been thrown around so many times. We saw that immediately after the local government elections last year, where the ANC didn't do well, or as well as they expected. They came out and said, we need to do a lot of introspection, we need to reflect on what has brought us here. It seems like we keep going back to the same thing. Is there a way forward? When do we move, or when do they move beyond this introspection and reflection phase?
Well, I think the battles are still going to be ongoing within the ANC until the National Elective Conference in December. Because even what is happening now, you see the reshuffle of cabinet and so forth, I still see it as something signaling what needs to happen before the National Conference in December. Mr. Zuma is flexing his muscle. He wants to make sure that he hands the baton to a person of his own choice. He is crafting his exit path. And to do that, he must make sure that he subjugates, he exercises complete power within the ANC and the alliance. Of course, there is serious opposition. Opposition now from civil society, opposition from members of the alliance. The question is whether this opposition will actually make him think differently.
Does that opposition hold any water? I mean, we saw what Kosatsu said yesterday. We know what the SACP has been saying, and civil society as well. As you mentioned, I mean, there's the shutdown that's going to take place on Friday. So a lot is going against the president at the moment. Is that enough? Just talk?
Look, it's not gonna be enough, but it depends on the path South Africans choose to oppose the Zuma administration. There are two paths. South Africans could choose to go the gradualist path. I call it the minimalist path, whereby they protest but allow ANC processes, parliamentary processes, constitutional court processes to proceed. In other words, they protest and there is no rush for immediate results. I call it the minimal path. But there is also another path, which I call it the revolutionary path. The revolutionary path is the one which is going to mobilize forces to change social relations fundamentally in South African society. And I don't think South Africa is actually ready for that kind of path.
I want us to go back to the press conference that we saw today, where the ANC SG was giving us a report back from that NWC. I mean, last night we saw that era where the minutes of that meeting were released, and essentially a lot of people who have social media, who have access to social media, already knew what was going to happen. And after listening to the SG, it seems like in essence nothing has really changed within the ANC, that for them it's business as usual. Is that an accurate assumption?
Yes, on the surface of things, we would say it's business as usual. But if you analyze closely the dynamics within the ANC, there is a lot going on. There is a lot of unhappiness, and there is a lot of factional solidarity based on resources, based on ethno-nationalism, based on liberation struggle histories. But there's a lot going on within the ANC. The ANC currently is in turmoil. The ANC currently is going through a period of crisis. And I think this is still going to continue. And the results of it, if the ANC is not careful, are going to be seen during the 2019 elections, where the ANC is likely to lose 2 more additional provinces to the Western Cape. And its victory is likely to reduce. It could hit the region of 57 in 2019. In other words, we're going to see post-2019 a constrained ANC as a governing party.
Let's look at the state that was given today. Another huge story is obviously the motion of no confidence, which is due to take place on the 18th of this month. Now, can we expect it to go the same way we've always seen it go, where the majority rules and the majority wins and the president stays in power essentially?
To be honest, because this has been attempted several times, one is very inclined to believe that, look, it's very unlikely that we'll see ANC parliamentarians voting the other way or abstaining. It's very unlikely, because I can tell you now that as we speak, a lot of influence through resources, through persuasion, is actually going on, you see, because Mr. Zuma is a survivor politically, and he's actually proven it several times. And we have very little reason to doubt that he will not survive even the vote of no confidence.
But if there was a secret ballot? If
there was a secret ballot, there's a completely different story. That's a completely different story, yes. Now we can only hope that the organization of citizens, South Africans, who are going to stand up and say no. We can only hope that that voice, that kind of voice, is going to integrate, is going to be widespread, is going to gain momentum, is going to be popular. Because once that happens, the ANC only has 1 million members. And how many are we as the people of
1
South
million
Africa?
registered members.
Yes, 1 million registered members.
Yes, and we are.
And a lot of bogus branches that don't exist. and tell me, if South Africans could stand up and say, no, this is our country, this is the future of our children.
And you speak, of one voice and South Africans and this call gaining momentum. I mean, we've seen now, when we've spoken about the march as well, and there are other, civil society groups who are saying that the president should step down. Something that I want to look at is the ordinary South African and what that looks like. We've got social media, which cannot be used as a measure, essentially, because the majority of people who vote are not even on social media, for example, or definitely the loyal ANC voter, the majority of them are definitely not on social media. But something that I saw and something that keeps coming up is this fight against white monopoly capital. That's something we can't ignore, because it keeps coming up, especially when things like this happen, where the president is being hailed for being the one who is standing up against white monopoly capital, and this is why there are so many calls for him to step down. This is why relations between him and the former finance minister broke down. This is why they were ousted. When I say they, I'm talking about the finance minister and his deputy Mcebisi Jonas. What's your take on this? Do you think it's conspiracies that are just there to confuse us, or is there some truth to it as an analyst?
Well, in my view, there is an element of truth to it, because white monopoly capital thrives on exploitation, and in the case of South Africa, I would say the exploitation of black people, especially the working class. That one we cannot deny it. That's how white monopoly capital survives. But if you are to oppose white monopoly capital, you must oppose it with moral authority. You can't take a leader whose moral standing is so depleted and you put him as the face of the struggle against white monopoly capital. You can't do that. And besides that, when you oppose white monopoly capital, you don't oppose it and then use it, and then use some corrupt so-called black capital, which you want to make sure it ascends. You don't do that, because that is not even black capital. I call it non-white capital. There's a difference between black people and non-whites.
Of course.
There's a difference. Non-whites are not black people. They may look like me in terms of skin color, but they are non-whites. Black people are black people.
Let's now look at this call for radical economic transformation, because everything ties, everything is connected essentially. We've got the ANC now really big on radical economic transformation. We hear it every single day, and a lot is being done around that, it seems. Now, what's your take on that going further? Do you think that is also a legitimate policy that they are really driving, or do you think it was post the elections, we need to find a way back into the people's hearts, we need to convince South Africans that we are working? What do you think is the truth there?
Look, the truth of radical economic transformation is that it is an ideological ploy on the part of some desperate political elite within the ANC. Why did they not do it all along? They have been in power. They embraced the capitalist path to transformation. The capitalist path to transformation has marginalized millions of black people and continues to do so. And today they are talking radical economic transformation. And for whose benefit? If you analyze it very closely, the beneficial participation of the same black political elite is still going to be remarkable. We'll never achieve inclusive economic growth and economic transformation until we have leaders who are prepared to lead by example.
Prof, this is such a multifaceted discussion, but I want us to wrap it up. Just in closing, what can we expect to see happening going further? What does the ANC need to do? Is there something they can do to save the situation, if there is any way to save it? And what do South Africans need to know? What does the average South African need to know about what's happening in the country politically?
I think, you see, there are three things which have come out of what is happening currently. And the three things actually characterize and define the political moment that we are in. The first one is about the ethical credentials of presidential leadership in an emerging democracy. That one is very, very important, you see. And secondly, what is emerging from what is happening is the fracturing of the elite consensus, which is at the foundation of the current dispensation. And thirdly, the deformation of the developmental state project, which the very same Zuma administration spoke about very strongly at the beginning from 2009 onwards. These three things, these are messages we must try to simplify and drive to our communities so that people know that we are in a predicament. The foundations of the negotiated settlement are beginning to unravel.
Prof, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for an insightful discussion.
Thank you.
That was political analyst Professor Kwandiwe Kondlo joining us live in studio for a discussion on the current political landscape in the country. We'll have more